The government has tried to argue that it does not need presidential or parliamentary approval because this is a commercial asset. But it is not. We will earn very close to zero interest on this loan, should it be made, while the government has to pay CPF holders up to 4% per annum. I was the first to point out that Singapore's extraordinary growth was no miracle. It's merely fueled by high inflows of cheap foreign labour and not resulting from any productivity growth. That's the only model the PAP know. They've been doing it since 1965. Growth fueled by cheap labour. Back in 2009, I wrote about this. It was in our first budget speech. Within a year, the government had announced a huge productivity budget with big giveaways for business. But the results have been mediocre. If I am in Parliament, I will push for accountability and scrutiny of all the funds the Finance Minister is so fond of putting money into every year. I know that most of you are concerned by the high levels of immigration and the constant calls to be more understanding of foreigners. Why should we be when we have to do NS at slave labour rates, while these foreigners walk in and are granted PR status and the ability to buy HDB flats? They can work here and thumb their noses at us. All Mr. Low Tia Kiang has said is that PAP policies have much improved. He claims it is the work of the WP. Where are their policy alternatives? They do not have an economist in their ranks. In contrast, the Reform Party has since 2009 had policy alternatives designed to provide a brighter future for Singaporeans. Some I have already mentioned, such as giving every one of you a stake in Temasek and GIC. Others include giving you the freehold of your HDB so that you can reap the real increase in the value of your property, so that you are not dependent on the government for upgrading and restructuring. Universal health insurance, combining MediSave, MediShield and MediFund, so that you no longer have to worry as long as you've been paying your premiums, that you won't be covered for a life-threatening operation or a catastrophic illness, but when you're old, you won't have to depend on your children or have to opt to die quietly. Giving you control over your savings decisions. I've already mentioned the broken promise of CPF that you would be able to draw out your money at 55. The figures show that the government doesn't need the money, so why have they changed the rules again and again? We want stricter controls on immigration. As an economist, perhaps I'd like to see a limit on the total numbers who can come in and an auction of those places. We want universal, free and inclusive education from preschool to secondary level. So the government, since the Pungalese by-election was announced, it seems to have had a miraculous effect on the purse strings of the PAP, as they have announced package after package. But we believe that preschool education should be free for everyone. We would reduce national service to 1 year and pay you a market wage with the aim of replacing conscription with a regular army. We would reduce government control over people's lives and privatize the GLC monopolies that dominate us and ensure that we pay higher prices for many things than in other countries. We'd introduce a minimum wage to protect our low-skilled or low-income workers from foreign cheap labour competition. I will be fearless about demanding transparency and accountability from the PAP and following the trail wherever the answers to my questions might lead. Of course, I will play a constructive role in Parliament. That is why we have policy alternatives that are better than the PAP's. In contrast to Ms. Lim, who said she was pro-Singapore, the Reform Party will be pro-Singaporean. In this election, the state-controlled media have often tried to bring the issues back to the local level. This is because the PAP enjoys a huge advantage because of its control of state resources, such as the HDB, the People's Association, and the Land Transport Authority. It is, of course, shameless in trying to use these to bribe and intimidate voters. But the people of Singapore are increasingly tired of this kind of pork-barrel politics. I have spoken out against the choking mentality that has for too long prevented the kind of healthy competition between parties that is part of democracy. Our mantra is that competition is just as necessary in politics as it is in business. However, since the Barisan Socialists walked out of Parliament in 1965, the PAP won by default. They didn't win by the popular mandate. They won by locking up their opponents by a walkout in Parliament. Since then, they have tried as best as they can to make it impossible to unseat them. Rather than debate on the issues, they have relied on the fact that they have choked the whole of Singapore. I cannot promise you millions of dollars in new spending. However, we presented last Friday a plan for Punggol East that was not reported much in the state media. These include a plan to bring more choice in childcare by working with the private sector and non-profits to bring a new non-political alternative to Punggol East. We also promised to look at possible private sector involvement in providing better feeder bus services within the constituency. These could serve as pilot projects for the rest of Singapore. Other less ambitious and easier to achieve ideas were legal clinics, youth mentoring schemes, job clinics, and financial management classes. Strangely, after we spoke of the need for more youth clubs and mentoring schemes, we saw that the PAP candidate flyer on Sunday promised exactly the same thing. As a hedge fund manager, I used to manage hundreds of millions of dollars. I am confident that we can manage the town council well and even serve as an example of efficiency, a model to the rest of Singapore, of openness and transparency. Some of our speakers will tell you about their experience and skill sets and why they can contribute. Our aim will be to bring you the best possible service. We believe it is wrong for resources to developed with your money, such as the software, to be sold to any political party. In fact, we will make it a point to develop open source software that will serve as a model for the rest of the country. I know that only democracy can bring you prosperity. Not working longer or harder. Not the PAP's recalibration and tweaking here and there every time you squawk too much. And not Workers' Party's big state ideas that patently come from a 1950s manual. I speak with some confidence here. My father wrote some of those policies, and he was many things, but he was not an economist. And I even wrote some articles for The Hammer back in the 1980s, and then helped out with the WP manifesto as a young student. And you know what? The world has moved on, and economies have shifted. And the WP are probably still using that same manifesto I helped write as a student. Our first rally was named the No More Broken Promises Rally. We told you that in 2011, 2 heavyweight brands came here. They both broke promises to you equally. If you spoil your vote on Saturday, you will spoil our chance at saving our democratic society, promised in our pledge. If you vote for PAP, you will spoil our chance of freedom, as well as condemning yourselves to the treadmill. If you vote for WP, you will spoil your chances of a brighter future. That is why you must vote for me. I think if you ignore the propaganda about 2-horse races, and you ignore the people telling you to vote against your heart, then you will come to see that I am the best option. What is voting tactically? It means voting for a party you don't believe in anymore, to stop a party you are angry with. That is betraying democracy. Don't worry about the figures, the statistics. Let me handle the numbers. We Singaporeans, we can vote for our future. We should vote for Reform Party, and we must vote for Mr. Kenneth Jeyaretnam. Vote for the Reform Party! Thank you!